Hello.
Hello, how are
Oops.
you?
Hello.
Good afternoon.
How's everybody doing?
Good.
Good. Sorry, I was just getting everything ready and uh wait a second.
Doing the big cooking push for Shavuot.
I'll be back in a second.
Okay, that's all right. I'm still getting organized here.
Hello, I'm Rabbi Poppy. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm still here. That's all I could say. You know,
That's good.
reading about
Very
what
good. One, I'm glad that you're still here, and two, that you can still say it.
that's very well said.
Okay, and let me make sure I've got everything up that I want. Oh, I have to share something else here too. I'm just calling up. No, that's not what I want.
This is the Haftarah that I got into trouble with Aura Preiser about.
Oh,
She wasn't teaching it as a Haftarah. She was teaching the first three chapters of Hosea.
yeah.
But I think I told you what happened.
Yeah, you did. You did.
Okay, I thought so.
Right. Let me, I've got to redo this a second. Sorry. Okay. I think we're just about ready to go. We'll wait for Susie to come back. Hi, Carol.
Hi, Rabbi. Yeah, Ricky probably won't make it.
I know that Shell is away. He is, I think, still in Istanbul and headed to
Oh
Cairo.
my gosh.
And uh, Maddie still has her family here, her kids from Colorado. So they won't make it, but we're all here. And when Susie gets back, we'll get started. Hope everyone is doing well. I'll take the opportunity now to wish everyone a Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach, Rabbi Poppy.
Um,
And to you too, Carol. To you too, Rabbi Zucker.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
So we've got already beginning the fourth book of the Torah. And so that's exciting.
Yes.
And well, the Midbar is an exciting book for all of the details and numbers, as we call it in English. It's a wild book and a lot of interesting stuff in there. And this Haftarah, of course, a very, very famous Haftarah. And again, short, but really quite remarkable. We're going to have to do a couple of other things to kind of put this Haftarah in context. Well, I'm going to get started since we are all here. Yehudi, are you still here?
Yeah, I'm still here. What
Okay.
happened was here. I'll say what happens when I put the picture up. If you want it that way, you can keep it that way. You see a gigantic picture, a stock picture, and
Yeah.
underneath that you see the real picture. So if you don't mind
Okay.
that, then I'll leave it.
Yeah. Doesn't bother. I know what you look like, so it doesn't bother me. I'm happy you're here. So I just adjusted so I can see, since there are only four plus me, I get to see all of you. And Okay, so Susie will be here when she's here, but we're going to get started. Again, the Haftarah, it comes from Hosea, from the second chapter. And Hosea is a very important prophet for a number of reasons. One, he is one of the two prophets that prophesy in the northern kingdom. he and Amos. 2, he is the first, and we'll see why, the first of the Treyasar, the collection of 12 prophets that sometimes is called the minor prophets, but as we discussed, first of all, minor only because of size. They're much smaller than the books of Yeshayahu, Yirmiyahu, and Yechezkel, but they're not minor in any way, shape, or form, and certainly not Hosea, which is one of the longest of all of the books. And there's also a discussion as to why it's the first of the Treyasar, the first of this collection of 12 prophets. And we have a statement here in the Talmud. Who would like to read?
I'll read.
Thanks, Carol.
The sages taught the order of the books of the prophets, Joshua and Judges, Samuel and Kings, Jeremiah and Ezekiel, Isaiah and the 12.
Yeah.
Consider.
So, I mean, that's, and of course, this is how we arrange them. I mean, we have Isaiah before Jeremiah and Ezekiel, but we have the books of the prophets arranged that way. In the New Testament, that's not how they are arranged. First of all, the prophets come at the end of their collection of what they call the Old Testament, because the prophets are, of course, looking forward to Jesus. So you move from the prophets to the Gospels. And also with they have a difference between what are prophetic books and historical books. So they put Ruth in with the historical books, but which nonetheless, this is certainly the order we have, more or less. And here's the explanation of why Hosea comes first. Go ahead.
Consider. Hosea preceded, as it is written, Hashem spoke first to Hosea.
Yeah, now, an interesting Hebrew phrase, Tchilat diber Hashem b'Hosea. It really means when God began to speak to Hosea. Rashi uses this as an example for understanding Bereshit bara, which we generally translate not as in the beginning, but in the beginning of, or when God began to create the world here too, and God began to speak to Hosea. But because it says tchilat, comes first. But the Gemara has a question about that. Go on.
But did God speak first with Hosea? Weren't there many prophets between Moses and Hosea?
And the answer?
And Rabbi Yochanan says he was the first of 4 prophets who prophesied in that period, and they were Hosea and Isaiah, Amos, and Micah.
Yeah, so that's, as we look at the 8th century prophets, those are they. And go on.
And the book of Hosea should precede the book of these prophets, of those.
Okay. So consequently, Hosea is indeed the first of the 12, the Treyasar books. And actually, well, yeah, let's start the beginning of the Haftarah.
You want me to read?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. The number of the people of Israel shall be like that of the sands of the sea, which cannot be measured or counted. And instead of being told, you are not my people, they shall be called children of the living God. The people of Judah and the people of Israel shall assemble together and appoint one head over them, and they shall rise from the ground. For marvelous shall be the day of Jezreel. Oh, call your brothers my people and your sisters lovingly accepted.
Okay, well, what's the feeling we get from the opening of the Haftarah?
That will multiply and that we will be successful.
Yeah, exactly. This sounds like a wonderful message. And of course, the notion that the number of the people of Israel shall be like that of the sands of the sea, which, of course, what does that recall? First of all, talking about the number of Israelites is the Kechol Hayam, as the sands of the
Promise
sea.
to Abraham.
Exactly, a promise to Abraham. But also, this is the reason why it's chosen for Parashat Bamidbar, because Bamidbar begins with the census of the people. So very nice to begin this way. So all of this sounds really, really wonderful. Also, this line, I didn't put it down, but that the people of Judah and the people of Israel shall assemble together. He is living at the time when the two kingdoms are split. He's living at the time of Yerovam II. And but they shall assemble together and appoint one head over them. That's an idea that we see in the prophet Yechezkel, although Yechezkel would likely have gotten it from him, not the other way around. And the expression va'alu min haaretz, they shall rise up from the ground, or they shall rise up from the earth. That also recalls another statement earlier on in the Torah.
Pharaoh.
Right, Pharaoh. Pharaoh's concerned about Bnei Israel becoming this fifth column. They'll join our enemies, Valumina Aretz. There are different ways of interpreting that. So all of this sounds great, but we have to look what preceded it. As we would say, Mala Mala Minyan, Mala Mala
Well,
Minyan.
also the point that Carol made, it actually doesn't say there anything about prosperity. It just says, lots and lots of numbers. We have lots of countries in the world that have huge numbers of people but are dirt poor.
Right.
It does not imply necessarily that this is going to be accompanied by prosperity. We know there were plenty of times in ancient Jewish history in the Book of Kings where there's famines, and even though the population seems more than adequate to fight wars, it still doesn't seem to be adequate to be fed. So,
Yeah.
in other words, I'm not, the very fact that it tells you that the number of people will be huge does not necessarily mean that everything is just hunky-dory. Okay, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I agree. I did have a question though about
Yes.
the word ruchama, lovingly accepted. Where did they get that out of ruchama?
That's how they translate it.
Rachem basically means to love. It comes from the word for a woman's uterus.
Rechem, I know.
Okay, so that's in other words, the basic down-to-earth meaning of the word rachem is to love. Only later, when it was pluralized and made into rachamim, did it get a secondary meaning of to have mercy on something. That's more of the primary use of that formulation of the word is post-Churban. It occurs occasionally here and there before, but as a practical matter, the singular predominates before the Churban, and it basically means more to love. So if you say Achotechem Ruchama, she is beloved.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we have to understand this. We have to know
Not like Toni Morrison, though.
Yeah, we have to know the context in the first chapter, and that is a little bit different. So we have the beginning of the book of Hosea. The word of the Lord came to Hosea, and the reigns of these kings in the south, and King Yerovam, son of Joash, in Israel. That's Yerovam the second. And then we have, here's like the first statement that God makes to Hosea. Do you want to keep going, Carol?
Sure. When the Lord first spoke to Hosea, the Lord said to Hosea, "Go get yourself a wife of whoredom and children of whoredom, for the land will stray from following the Lord." So he went and married Gomer, daughter of Diblaim. She conceived and bore him a son, and the Lord instructed him, "Name him Jezreel, for I will soon punish the house of Jehu for the bloody deeds of Jezreel, and put an end to the monarchy of the house of Israel. In that day I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel."
We'll come back to that. Let's just go on a little bit more.
She conceived again and bore a daughter, and he said to him, "Name her Lo Ruchama, for I will no longer accept the house of Israel or pardon them, but I will accept the house of Judah, and I will give them victory through the Lord their God. I will not give them victory with bow and sword and battle. by horses and riders.
It's like it's in parentheses because it's kind of an aside that, pardon me, that he is, you know, in contrast to his attitude toward northern Israel, is a slightly different attitude toward Judah. But go on.
After weaning Lo Ruchama, she conceived and bore a son. Then he said, "Name him Lo Ami, for you are not my people, and I will not be your God."
Okay. Now, it doesn't sound quite the same as the opening of the second chapter.
It sounds completely the opposite.
Exactly. And we'll come back to this whole issue of who Hoshea marries, a prostitute, or they shall a wife of whoredom and children of whoredom. But it's impossible. It's important to first of all recognize, why is he supposed to do this?
Because God is not going to be our God anymore.
Yeah, why not?
Strayed from God.
Yeah, they strayed from God, exactly. The land will stray from following the Lord. This is this great metaphor of Hosea, and appears elsewhere, of the relationship between God and Israel as a marriage. And when the children of Israel go after other gods, it's as if they're whoring after other lovers. They are committing adultery, as it were, toward God. So Hoshea's life is going to become a symbolic action. I mean, there are other prophets who engage in symbolic actions, particularly Yechezkel, but this is a pretty powerful one. So you are going to marry this prostitute, this whore, however you want to understand that, and you are going to give your children what are not such wonderful names, indicating God's anger and frustration with the Northern Kingdom. And this is like the day of Israel is seen as positive in the second chapter. Here, it's not so positive. Name him Israel, for I will soon punish the house of Yehu for the bloody deeds at Israel. And on one hand, Yehu did something good. Is he took out and destroyed and killed Izebel and the king before him in the north, the house of Ahab. Remember, Achav and Izebel were not exactly the most wonderful characters, and Yehu made sure that they were gone and taken care of. So, but it's not particularly pleasant. So, again, and then the rest of this, and so that's the first chapter. Now we come back to our Haftarah, and wait, why am I not getting? Sorry. There we go. So we come back to our Haftarah, which begins in a much more positive fashion. And we're going to see this alternation, which is not uncommon in the prophetic writings, between some very positive stuff and some really negative stuff, going back and forth. And of course, that captures the eyes of our commentators. It's not just modern commentators that question, why are these two things connected? So Rashi also raises that question. Go ahead.
What is the connection of retribution and consolation juxtaposed in one speech?
Yeah, so basically we have him giving this horrible statement about Bnei Israel, and he has to name the children, and then, boom, it changes. Okay.
Our rabbis explained in Pesachim, Hosea felt that he had sinned by saying, "Exchange them for another nation." He stood and begged mercy for them.
And we'll look at that section in a moment.
And in Sifrei Devei Rav, in the section commencing, and Israel abode in Shittim, we learned, Rabbi says, some sections are close to each other, yet as far apart as east is from west. For you are not my people, and the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea. What is the connection of one to the other?
So Rabbi obviously recognizes that there are some very curious juxtapositions in the Bible. That, how is one connected to the other? And his great image, as far apart as east is far from west. Um, so now he's going to try and explain that.
This
Of
can be
course, Mashal. He's going to give a parable.
This can be compared to a king who became angry with his wife. He summoned a scribe to come and write a bill of divorcement. Before the scribe arrived, the king became reconciled with his wife. Said the king, "Is it possible that this scribe should leave here divided? That is, his heart should be..." Where am I? Oh, that his heart should be divided and bewildered, saying, "Why did the king send for me?" He said to him, "Come and write that I am doubling her ketubah."
Yeah, so a wonderful little story. He's planning divorcing his wife and they work it out, but they've already paid the scribe to come and doesn't want the scribe to get angry, like, what do you schlep me out here for? He said, well, I want you to double the amount in the ketubah. It's which is kind of an interesting mashal that he presents here. And kind of lovely there. By the way, though I haven't read the book, it's in German. There is a whole book on the parables. This is a story, or this is like the story of a king that appears throughout the Midrashic literature. So he gives that wonderful parable. Now Rashi comes to giving a more straightforward explanation.
And according to its simple meaning, this is the reason for its juxtaposition. For you are not my people, and I will not be yours. I will show myself as though I am not yours, and you shall be exiled among the nations. And even there you shall multiply and grow, and there you shall lay it to your heart to return to me, as it is said through Moses. And you shall lay it to your heart among all the nations where Hashem has exiled you. And the Lord your God shall return your captivity here too, and the children of Judah and the children of Israel shall be gathered together.
Well, this means that Rashi is seeing along in Haaretz and Shemot as having a similar meaning to here, because if we didn't know better, we would think the along in Haaretz means leave the land. Right. Rashi is taking it to mean come back to the land, which is very good, because basically when Pharaoh says along in Haaretz, he means leave Mitzrayim, and where they're going to go to Eretz Yisrael. So, in other words, why are we taking an expression that was associated with with Pharaoh and using it here, clearly associated? So the answer is it does not mean they're going to leave the land. It means they're going to return to the land.
Return to the land. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but
which is possible.
Yeah. And I think that that's something that runs through prophetic writing, runs through the Torah. We see it here in Deuteronomy, the notion of God's anger. God will punish the people, and yet God will not totally reject them. God will take them back. And I think that's also partially why we have so often in the prophetic writing the back and forth of like, you're going to be miserable, but I'll take you back. I'm going to make you suffer, but I'm going to take you back. Even in the Tochecha, it's pretty gruesome to read all the stuff, especially when I've been reading it the past couple of years. But there's always a sense that God will somehow take them back. And so this Haftarah, for all of its negative context, I mean, the entire first chapter of Hosea, and even what we're about to come to, it's there's nonetheless a lot of hope here, which is how the Haftorah will end, as most Haftorah end. So I just wanted to share with you the interesting uh, story that the rabbis create about this instance between Hosea and God. So they imagine this discussion, and by the way, the section that I quoted above from Baba Batra, right? Yeah.
I'm sorry.
From Baba
Oh, I'm
Batra.
sorry, but yeah, I have one from Baba Batra. Yeah.
Yeah. But it also appears here in Psachim before this section where it says, Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu Hosea. Blessed Holy One says to Hosea, Banecha chatu, your children have sinned. V'hayalo lamar, and the Gemara imagines how Hosea should have responded to God. Banechahem, they're your children. B'nei chanunechahem, they are the children of your loved ones. B'nai B'nei Avraham, Yitzchak v'Yaakov, the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Galgel rachamecha alehem, literally roll your mercy upon them, have mercy upon them. And the Gemara goes on, Lo dayo shelo haya amar kach. It's not enough that he didn't even say that. So Hosea was wrong in, first of all, not giving the correct response immediately. But also, Ella amar lefanav, he said before God, Ribono shel olam, master of the universe. Kol olam shelchahu. The entire universe is yours. Ha'avirem be'uma acheret. Exchange him for another nation. It's kind of hard to imagine one of the prophets saying this. Certainly Moshe Dafka would not. And, when he had the opportunity, when God said, listen, step out of the way, I'll wipe them out, and with you, I'll start all over again. And Moses says, no. It could be also the desire to make a distinction between, for the rabbis, what they knew about Moshe and Hosea. They often want to make a distinction between, Moshe was a prophet, but he was a prophet unlike other prophets. And then it goes on. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Blessed Holy One, said, Ma'aseh lezaken hazeh, what shall I do with this elder? I might have translated it, what shall I do with this old guy? He doesn't know how to stand up for his people. Omer lo, I'll say to him, Lech v'kach isha zona ve'holid lecha banim znunim. Go take a prostitute, and you'll give birth to children of prostitution. Ve'achar kach omer lo, and afterwards I'll say to him, Shalcha milfanecha, send her away. Im hu yachol lishloach, if he could yet send her away, afani ashalach et Yisrael, then I too will be able to send away Israel. Shne'emar, Vayomer Adonai el Yoshua, lech kach lecha eshet znunim v'yaldei znunim. It goes on to say this is the command. So, what can I do to this guy? He doesn't want to stand up from Israel. Well, I'm going to put him in a situation. I'm going to have him take a wife, have children, and then I'm going to tell him, get rid of her. Because that's essentially what Hosea is suggesting to God. The people are cheating on you, so get rid of them. Exchange them. And it's as if God knows that there's still love between Hosea and his wife and his children, even if he's not sure they're his children because she hasn't been exactly loyal. So it's just kind of an interesting dialogue.
Rabbi Pavka, I think
Yeah.
we should modify the term prostitute. If that's the term that they're using, then I think that definitely has to be modified. The word zona in the Tanakh, it does not mean prostitute. It means a woman whose behavior is, let's just say, freer than the general law expects of women at that time. So, for example, Yiftach is a ben isha zona. Tell me,
Right.
if that means a professional prostitute, why does the father proceed to acknowledge paternity? Obviously, it simply means a woman who, could be seduced, but it does not mean it in slang it would be called a loose woman. You understand what I'm saying? It does not mean a professional prostitute. Even Rachav is probably a madam. She's outgrown her days of being a professional. Now she's running the joint, so to speak. So you have to be very careful when Ashes and Rini days and Unin. Have to understand that to mean, Israel is not abandoning Hashem altogether. They're still worshiping Hashem, but they seem to flirt with other gods too. And, that's basically, of course, the standpoint to the Tanakh totally objectionable. Tanakh simply will not accept that anymore. Let's say you're not, one of our members is in a hospital, and for some reason you're unavailable. So the hospital says, "Oh, if the rabbi is unavailable, we'll get a Catholic priest to pay for you, okay, and pay you a visit." So most people would say, something, I'll pass. I'd rather not have that at all than have, and so that's I think what you have to see here. That the throwing around the word prostitution here is not accurate, and it's not precise either.
Okay, I just copied the translation. This is a translation that they have on Sfaria in the Gemara. And, certainly it was the new JPS that talked about a wife of whoredom and children of whoredom. I think they're, yeah.
Well, 45 years ago. Basically, I'm sure I can find you a translation that'll say a loose woman or something along that line, but I'm saying, even if I couldn't, that you have to understand that just, what's happened is something gets institutionalized. If the King James institutionalizes it and there's no real motivation to change it, okay, just stay stuck in translation unless somebody gets up and realizes that it doesn't make sense.
But nonetheless, she's not a totally reliable partner. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, but that's not saying that she's a prostitute.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
If a woman cheats on her husband, that does not make her a prostitute. You could say it makes her an adulteress, but it does not make her a prostitute.
Right. So now we return to the previous condemnation of Israel, as we have what is called the Riv, the argument, like a court case. This is not presented so much as an actual court case, but certainly there's the sense that this is, in fact, like a court case. It's symbolically this judgment, or they take each God. Frequently takes Israel to judgment, or Israel takes God to judgment, or at least who was it? Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev would do that. But or even Avraham, when he asks, "Hashofet kol haaretz lo yaseh mishpat," But so here we have this arraignment. Who would like to continue? Anyone volunteer?
Yeah, I'll continue.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Susie.
Remonstrate your mother, remonstrate her, for she is not my wife, and I am not her husband. And let her put away her whoredom from her face, and her adultery from between her breasts. Else will I strip her naked, and leave her on the day as on the day she was born. I will make her like a wilderness, render her like desert land, and let her die of thirst. I will also disown her children, for they are now a whore's brood, in that their mother has played the whore. She that conceived them has acted shamelessly, because she thought, I will go after my lovers who supply my bread and my water, my wool and my linen, my oil and my drink.
Yeah. So there's kind of a little bit of a midah keneged midah, that if she is going to play the whore or the adulteress, then what is God going to do? All right, you want to use your body? I'm going to show your body to everybody. I'm going to strip her naked and leave
Well,
her.
it shows you in verse 4 that he's using Zununel, which means prostitution, as if it was a synonym with Na'apufel,
Right.
which is adultery. So that makes it perfectly clear that what he means is not a professional prostitute who collects money for services and has multiple customers, and she'll never know who the father is if she happens to get pregnant. It means a woman who basically has knows men other than her husband,
Yeah.
in the biblical sense.
Yeah. But certainly very, very powerful punishment. And again, it's not just, she'll be like a wilderness. We saw that last week, Dafka, in the Haftarah, in Yirmiyahu, where he says, Arur hagever asher yiftach ba'adam. Cursed is the man who puts trust in human beings. He's going to be like a bush in the desert. And here she is. She's like in desert land. She's gonna die of thirst. She's got no future. And even her children, she won't even think, okay, at least my children. No, 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 no. They're going to be ignored. And she was thinking, I will go after my lovers. Who are her lovers that supply her bread and water, wool and linen and oil and drink? Who are those lovers? If again we're understanding who this woman is, it's not just
But by the
Moshe's
way,
wife.
where it says Kivanez Nimhema,
Mhm.
one of the translators, the New American Standard of 2020, translates
Yeah.
because they are children of infidelity
Oh, okay.
instead of prostitution.
Well, there you go.
But it's not like she's doing it for nothing. She's getting bread and water and stuff from them. So it does kind of sound like she's a prostitute.
No, 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 no. If a man buys presents for his wife, that doesn't make her a prostitute. Let's not get carried away. Okay, that was too much. Think about it.
I don't think so, but okay.
Yeah. Well, at the very least, she's thinking of them as her sugar daddies. And not the lollipops. But given who Hoshea's wife represents, who are these lovers?
The other deities that Baal and Astarte that the Israelites have been worshiping.
Yeah, exactly. So, again, this is we'll come to the idea of like, is this a reality? Was he truly married to a loose woman? We'll take a look at some commentaries. So, God is not yet done with her. He's, there's going to be a lot more punishment. Go on, Susie, assuredly.
Assuredly, I will hedge up her roads with thorns and raise walls against her, and she shall not find her paths. Pursue her lovers as she will, she shall not overtake them, and seek them as she may, she shall never find them.
Oh, by the way, this whole notion of like, hide and seek, she'll pursue them, overtake, seek them, find them. We see that Fishbane points out this is, very typical of the Bible's language, and for especially for lovers, we see it a lot in Shir HaShirim. But that's not necessarily.
I think Hosea is cribbing this from Shir HaShirim.
Pardon me?
Most people think that Shir HaShirim is a later book. Yeah, Zakovich writes this in his but he acknowledges that there's plenty of stuff in it that goes back to Solomon's time. Yafahat Rayati Ketirsa, Mavak Yerushalayim, that's got to be no later than 900. So, it's clear that in Shir HaShirim, the language is classical for love. Here, they're taking love language and using it in a way which is not love. So
Right.
I think
Exactly.
my own feeling is that it's from selections that later ended up in Shir HaShirim. Well,
Right.
we're
No,
around, is what Hosea is quoting here.
Yeah, I would not say that, because we have it elsewhere in the Bible, so I would not say that this was taken from Shir HaShirim, but that
But
it's
Shir HaShirim put the expression on the map.
Yeah.
Because yes, you do have it in the Torah. Will be Kashtem Misham et Hashem Alechecho Matzata Ki Tidrishenu B'chol Elavcho V'chol Nafshecha. How many other times do you have that in the Torah? whereas in Shir Shirim is all over the place,
Right. But I think that that line from Deuteronomy, probably that you will seek God and find Him. I think that probably served as much more of the source
Yeah,
for.
but I bet Rabbi Zucker would say that line itself was cribbed from Shir Shirim.
Well, actually,
Because don't you think that the Varim basically represents 7th century writing and not earlier writing? So if that's what you think it is, then it precedes Hosea.
Yeah. Well, I would say that it's not surprising that we'll come to a section where clearly there's some influence of Yehoshua on Yirmiyahu, and has been pointed out by commentators, there's a lot of influence of Hosea on Yirmiyahu. That Hosea would be influenced as well by Deuteronomy is not necessarily a shock, because there are those who feel that much of Deuteronomy reflects a northern province. That was, I think, I haven't read the book yet. The Israeli Heritage of Judah by H.L. Ginsburg. I don't know how.
Yeah. Well, T.J. says that in his JPS commentary.
Yeah. So that there would be some northern connection. Go on. Then she will say,
I will go and return to my first husband, for then I fared better than now. She will not consider this. It was I who bestowed on her the new grain and wine and oil, I who lavished silver on her and gold, which they used for Baal.
yeah. So, wow. you know, she's going after all these the Baalim, but they weren't the ones who supplied all this in the first place. It was God. And then what did she do? She went around and used it for the Baalim. So it's like, she didn't realize where the gift came from, and then she misused the gift. Go on.
Assuredly, I will take back my new grain in its time and my new wine in its season, and I will snatch away my wool and my linen that served to cover her nakedness. Now will I uncover her shame in the very sight of her lovers, and not one of them shall save her from me.
Yeah, continuing that theme of just like, you think you've got all of this, I'm gonna take it all away.
I don't think Navuta should be looked upon as nakedness or even shame, which I think what they mean by that is nakedness. I think Navuta is just a possessive of Nivala. In fact, there's a mapike there. In other words,
Yes.
Nivala basically means behavior that's totally unacceptable.
Navlita.
Kind of behavior that's going to get you killed. Okay?
Foolish.
Every single person who commits a Nivala in the Tanakh ends up dead. Okay? And not in bed. Okay? So what's being said is not that I'm going to take your clothes off. That you could read it that way, but I think it's more sensible to read this, meaning everybody who thinks you're an upstanding citizen is going to realize that you're really not an upstanding citizen. The furthest away from that path can be imagined.
Well, Nivala seems to have a very wide semantic range. I mean, first of all, the root naval could be, which would go with the foolishness and
Well, I'm
licentious.
going with Nivala. Okay, in other
Yeah,
words, Nivala and
Nivala.
possessive will become Nabuta.
Yeah, right.
Yasta Nivala B'Yisrael. Remember what Eob says?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what we're talking about is shameful behavior, not shame in a sense of one of your skirt dropped off or something like that. That's not what it means. Okay, it means you've been trying to make look like you're an upstanding citizen. I'm going to now make it clear to everyone that's precisely what you're not.
Yeah, but I think there's still an emphasis here on sexual licentiousness, and
Oh
he
yeah, absolutely. I'm just saying this one sentence 2:12 that should be translated your shameful behavior. Absolutely, it's clear what he's
yeah.
talking about. He's made it clear already.
Yeah. Go on. What else is he going to
And
do?
I will end all her rejoicing, her festivals, new moons, and Sabbaths, all her festive seasons. I will lay waste her vines and her fig trees, which she thinks are a fee she received from her lovers. I will turn them into brushwood, and beasts of the field shall devour them. This will I punish her for the days of the Baalim, on which she brought them offerings. When decked with earrings and jewels, she would go after her lovers, forgetting me, declares Hashem.
Yeah. So the punishment.
Abandoning me, I think, would be better than forgetting me. Again, the word shachach in Tanakh does not mean to forget the way I would say, I forgot my teach. That's not what it means. It means to abandon in the sense of consciously forget, something you make it look like you don't want. It has a connotation more like hazav than a connotation of just simply, overlooking. It's a conscious act.
Yeah, and certainly her going after her lovers, the Baalim, is most definitely a conscious act. And is a conscious act of abandoning God. Now, we began with Rivu v'imchem Rivu, and then we have a number of sections now, Lachain, therefore, or assuredly, they translated here. And we're going to have yet one more. But first, we have the accusation, and then the consequences, the punishment. But once again, we have lachain, but this response is a little bit different. And we're going to see once again that alternation between the negative and the positive. So go on, Susie.
Assuredly, I will speak coaxingly to her and lead her through the wilderness and speak to her tenderly. I will give her her vineyards from there and the valley of Achor as a plowland of hope. There she shall respond as in the days of her youth, when she came up from the land of Egypt.
Now that clearly influenced Yirmiyahu. You know, Lech techa charai b'midbar, follow me into the wilderness, into an unsown land, and he's zacharti la chesed ne'urayich. I remember the devotion of your youth, where the wandering in the wilderness was almost like a honeymoon period. This was a period of young love where there was tremendous devotion and passion for one another. Um, Not the most common picture in the Tanakh, as we've talked about before. I mean, you do have it. But generally, we think of Bnei Yisrael in the wilderness as, we're coming out, we're studying Bamidbar, and there are plenty of cases where, they're not so devoted, they're not so wonderful, but nonetheless, there is that picture in Hosea, and then, following it in Yirmiyahu, and now again, some more wonderful puns that are brought in. Go ahead. And
in that day, declares Hashem, you will call me Ishi, and no more will you call me Baali.
So again, Ishi, ha-ish sheli, my man, literally my husband, from the word ish. And no more will you call me Baali. Baal is also husband. So she's not even going to use the name Baal anymore. We're going to use, the proper name or a proper name for the relationship with God.
In the Tanakh as a whole, you'll find that it's actually more likely for the word ish to be used for husband than Baal. I think this verse is a second side, like what you call a intentional ambiguity of getting across that when you start using the Baal for husband, when you started worshiping the Baal. In other words, up to that point, nobody ever called their husband their Baal. Okay, but even for example, Sarah calls her husband Adoni. You'll find. But in other words, the whole use of the term Baal was introduced during a period of Shelton. So it's this is even an issue in modern Israel. Feminists in modern Israel don't like the Hebrew term Baal for husband and would prefer to replace it because it sounds like master and owner.
Mm-hmm.
Bal Hafundak from the play. I forget, Bal Hafundak. La 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 la. Yeah.
Yeah, well, but
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
Baal also means owner.
Right.
So Bala Pundak, the owner of the store, and Baal also master in terms of, well, yeah, I mean, just
Alagula,
yeah, yeah,
wagon driver, the master of wagonry.
right.
The Tanakh
It was
uses
actually,
it too, Baal Bor, Baal Shor. But
mhm.
and the Tanakh will use in third person Baal Haisha. But you very rarely see a woman referring to her husband as my Baal. Okay, that's exactly what I think 218 is addressing.
Mhm. Okay, go on.
For I will remove the names of the Baalim from her mouth, and they shall never more be mentioned by name. In that day I will make a covenant for them with the beasts of the field, the birds of the air, and the creeping things on the ground. I will also banish bow, sword, and war from the land. Thus I will let them lie down in safety.
Again, kind of seen very often as kind of a messianic prophecy because it reflects prophecies that seem to be pointing more to a messianic time, although we have to be
It,
careful. It's not always
yeah, the term
messianic the way
Betach
we think
doesn't mean
messianic.
safety, it means security.
Right.
Another mistake here. Okay, security means you don't have to worry that someone's going to attack you. Okay, that's what security means. Okay, safety is I got a fire extinguisher in order to make sure that if a fire breaks out, I can put it out. Those are two different words, and the Tanakh Betach basically means security.
Yeah. Well, even in modern Hebrew.
Yeah, I know. I'm saying
Tachon.
we're studying Tanakh right now. Yeah, absolutely.
So, and now the most famous line from the Haftarah, or at least for those of us who put on tefillin, um,
And I will espouse you forever. I will espouse you with righteousness and justice, and with goodness and mercy. And I will espouse you with faithfulness, that you shall be devoted to Hashem.
yeah, beautiful, beautiful line. And actually, in a double ring ceremony, in a chatunana wedding, um, though there's a specific phrase that the husband recites, as we all know, Hariat Mekudesha Libet Bat Zogadat Moshe Yisrael, behold, you are consecrated to me with this ring in accordance with the laws of Moses in Israel. And there's no phrase that the woman has to say because traditionally a woman didn't necessarily give a ring. So today women can choose whatever they'd like to say. I have to say the one they choose most often because it's the simplest and it's just gorgeous. Anila Dodi Vidodi. But in the past, some have chosen this. Today, it's generally seen as too long. And ve'irastich is not an easy word for a lot of people. Ve'irastich li
Or
le'olam.
you'd have to change it to Veirasticha.
Well, that's
Because the
also true.
woman's talking to a man.
Right. But just quoting a pasuk. Just as when we bless our daughters,
Or
I
don't you
still
say
say
Yishmael?
Yavarechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha.
Yeah,
But
but you also say Yimei
Beautiful.
Hashem to Sarah Rivka Rachel Valeah.
yeah, right.
Either way, the point is, what is Hosea doing here?
He is he's creating a brit. As he mentions before, there is a brit between God and the Jewish people, just like a marriage. And there is, it's this remarkable image of the relationship between God and Israel as a marriage, which Israel was the only people that used that image. It didn't appear, from what I learned, it did not appear in the ancient Near Eastern materials. Guys can tell me if I am wrong, but they didn't use that image. This was purely an Israelite image. And it's very powerful that, because the marriage relationship may not have contained all of the romantic, passionate connotations that we feel today. Marriage was a little bit different in the ancient world, but there still was passion and there still was uh, devotion. So it's a very, very powerful metaphor. And, not surprisingly, that we recite this line as we wrap the tefillin around our fingers, just like, as it were, putting on a wedding ring. Of course, it's also powerful because, this is how we start the day. I mean, the tefillin, of course, represent, what we're going to think about and what we're going to do. The arm action, the head mind. And this is really a statement of, what are our values as Jews as we start the day, as we bind ourselves to God. So that this, I'm not saying this is what Hosea is saying, but when it becomes translated into the line that we recite for putting on tefillin, I think it's a very, very powerful line.
Rabbis picked a good one to use for tefillin.
Yeah.
It just comes from the Kabbalah from the 16th century, Rabbi. It's not something that was said all along. Okay, it's when the Zohar took over and this marriage metaphor became almost, standard for practically everything you do, that this formula was introduced. Do you follow where I'm going here? I don't think the formula of saying this in the morning when you put on tefillin is a whole pile of things you say. Open up, you say you have a Rinat Israel, open that up and take a look and see how many things you can say if you want to add on to just a straight brachot to putting on tefillin that Rinat Israel offers you. Almost every one of them comes from the Kabbalah Ta'ari, like the Tikkun Leil Shavua for that matter. That's not something that existed before that.
No, but the
But
rabbis,
on board at that time, Kabbalah Shabbat was born on Boi Chala. At a time of rejection after the expulsion from Spain, we introduced a whole bunch of things into tefillah to express love and affection and stuff of this nature. But understand that doesn't mean that this kind of stuff was actually said back in the days of the Babylonian Talmud. It certainly was not.
but certainly for the rabbis, that metaphor was very much still part of the tradition. I mean, when they create all the midrashim, we're coming up to Shavuot, where they create the whole image of it being like a marriage ceremony, as Moshe, the Shushbin, brings the bride Israel to the mountain to God. So certainly that was, and even the interpretation of Shir Hashirim as referring to the relationship between God and Israel. So, the Kabbalah is drawing on a very, very strong tradition. Now, how they use it and interpret it, that is, very different.
It was something to draw from. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
That prayer that they say before and after Sfirat HaOmer is absolutely off the wall. That's another Kabbalistic state.
Oh, well, yeah, the whole idea of yichud.
You choose what you think is appropriate.
Yeah.
The Jewish people have accepted Kabbalah Shabbat. They've accepted, Ve'eras Tifli. But, most people I know do not say any of the stuff that's associated with Sfirat HaOmer other than Psalm 67, which is where you're actually talking about harvesting the field there. Eretz Yivula, Okay, so yeah, like I say, with the Kabbalistic stuff, you've got to pick and choose.
Yeah. So, well, we've reached the end of our time, and maybe next year we'll take a look about the issue of Hosea's marriage. I didn't have a chance to translate these, but
that will be an interesting one because, and I didn't want to introduce it, but Gewurz had some rather interesting thoughts about who Hosea took and the status of Hosea and Gomer in its original context. He never wrote about it. He only discussed that he was working on it, he said, but some rather, I would say, controversial thoughts, and it'll be if we look at this next year, it'll be worthwhile mentioning that.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Of course, the rabbis themselves are they talk about puns. It's not just Yeshiva
There's
Ali,
plenty of puns with
but they make plenty of puns about who Gomer is. You know, the wife mentioned in chapter 1, from Divlayim. What does Divlayim mean? You know,
raisin cakes.
really risque stuff there.
Yes. Isha Kochacha, Rabbi Papi. And
Yeah.
again,
Mark.
Thank you.
Kol hakavod.
Bye.
Shabbat shalom. Hag
Chag shalom,
sameach.
everybody. Chag sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Just for those, just so you know that Allison has a yard site tonight for her
Okay.
mother. So we do have you probably got notice about an online minyan. So,
Okay, we'll be
all
there.
right. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.